Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio, it's time for the GNFCC 400 Insider. Connect, build, and grow with the Greater North Fulton Chamber of Commerce.
Hello and welcome to the GNFCC 400 Insider, the monthly radio show and podcast presented by the Greater North Fulton Chamber. I'm Kali Boatright, President and CEO of the Greater North Fulton Chamber. Today, we are excited to hear a 2022 legislative wrap-up from Lauren Fralick. Lauren is a principal with the newly formed Fralick Bozeman Public Affairs. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks, Kali. Happy to be here.
We are thrilled to have you as well. Now, House and Senate lawmakers adjourned sine die around midnight after considering hundreds of bills following a very long legislative session that ended on April 4th. I know it was a really crazy year. A difficult floor and committee meeting schedule kept lawmakers busy for several months. So, Lauren, I assume you and your team were also very, very busy during that time.
We were. I always tell my family I'm living at the Capitol during January through April, and I'll come home to eat every now and again.
That's nice. Well, at least you got it all in that very compact time period, although this year was a little bit longer from the perspective of how long they actually went forward. So I want to start by just telling you congratulations on your new company, Fralick Bozeman Public Affairs. If you don't mind, I always like to start out with hearing a little bit about you personally, your background, and what led to this great career in public affairs and politics.
Well, I joke that I was dropped on my head as a baby, and for some reason I've always liked politics and always been drawn to it. Don't really know why. My family was not very politically engaged. I did have an uncle who was the sheriff of the county where I grew up pretty much my whole life, and so
was that here in Georgia?
That was in Emanuel County. Yes.
Great.
Yes. And so we did do some campaigning for him when I was a child growing up. But as a, teenager, I volunteered on every campaign that I could just to, for whatever reason, I wanted to be politically active. So I'd go door to door for our members of Congress or our state legislators. So, and then, went on to college at UGA and learned about lobbyists and thought, I want to be a part of the process and in some way help make a difference. But I don't really want to run for office. And so being a lobbyist was a way to do that. And so I thought that public affairs was the right path for me. After college, I went on to work on numerous campaigns for various people running on the local level or the statewide or congressional levels and doing political fundraising for different candidates. And then from there, went on to my first lobbying job at the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. And so that was a great place to get started because it gave me exposure to so many different policy areas and issues that I got to work on there. So,
and I think that's where we met the first time when you were at the Georgia Chamber. So that's a great way to get plugged in.
Yes. And got a great wealth of knowledge and met so many wonderful people and a great network through that organization. And then recently, as of August of 2021, started Fralick Bozeman Public Affairs. And so it's been a goal and of interest of mine to have my own firm. And so John Bozeman, my business partner, and I set out to start our new firm, and we also started Roll Call Public Affairs. And so we are helping bring tools and resources to our clients who are the business community to help them better engage and better navigate the political times that we're in.
It sounds like we have a lot in common as a chamber. We do the very same thing. So that's awesome. Well, I am super excited to have you with us today and be able just to share with our listeners a little bit more about the legislative session and maybe a little peek into what we expect to be coming in the coming year, as it is a very exciting year. So let's look back. What, in your opinion, of course, how does this year's legislative session compare to previous years? And were there, in fact, any bills that you think are going to really make a lasting impact to the state of Georgia, either way, positive or negative?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of comparing to previous years, this year did differentiate because it was a year following the redistricting process. And so, as most of your listeners probably know, every 10 years, we go through the census process and gather up how many people are living in different places. And then the legislature comes back in for a special redistricting session, which they did in November of 2021 to help redraw the lines. So the state House and Senate district, your local districts, your congressional districts, because each of those districts are based on population. And so as population in our metropolitan areas grow, and Georgia being one of the fastest growing states in the country, we had a lot of growth. And so a lot of those districts had to change. And so and then in places in rural Georgia, they actually, some places lost population or did not grow very much. And so in those districts, they have to pick up more geography to therefore pick up more people, whereas in your metropolitan areas, they had to reduce their geographic size to stay within that population threshold. And so that's always a contentious process. It's not just a partisan process. It's also sometimes, pitting one member of the same party maybe against their colleague who's just a district over of the same party because of how that population has either shrunk or grown. They may have to pick up parts of that person's district.
Sure, if the line moves, absolutely.
Exactly. So a lot of enemies are created quickly during that process. And so it's a tough process. And so that carried over into the regular session because they ended in November going through that process and passing the maps. But then they came back and still had local maps and things to address. And so it just was, a lot of tension over those issues.
That makes sense. A lot of tension and I would imagine angst over what the upcoming election season would look like with the newly drawn lines as well.
Exactly, because now they have to run in their new district. So just a few months later, you're running in this new area where you may not have lived or worked in or known people before.
Right. So. No, that makes all the sense in the world. And so probably this year then compared to previous, at least because this process, as you mentioned, is only every 10 years, a little more contentious than previous year's sessions, maybe a little more relaxed in the past.
Yes.
Well, very good. So as a chamber, obviously, we're very, very focused on business-related bills. So I wanted to ask what you thought was the most significant business-related bill that lawmakers were maybe not able to agree or to get passed. Because I know there was a lot of discussion about a lot of things down during the 4 months down there. But what were your thoughts on business-related bills?
Yeah, so there are always a number of things that don't cross the finish line and get discussed. This year was heavy on tax issues and tax matters. And so there were a number of bills that the business community was advocating on extending the sunset because most of the tax credits or exemptions that are currently in law in Georgia have a sunset date, meaning, a date certain that they will go away. And so the legislature has to vote to extend those exemptions and timeframes. And so there were a number of bills this year that they did get an extension, but not to the level we were hoping of. As you know, Kali, with your work that you do with all the businesses, businesses like to see certainty. And so businesses are planning not for just 1 or 2 years out, but for 5 or 10 or 20 years out. And so they look at making financial investments based on those incentives. And, in the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development world that we're in, everybody's competing, all of our surrounding cities and surrounding states with incentives, and it's just a part of the game. And a lot of people don't like it, or they think, well, we don't have to do that. Georgia is already the number one place to do business, and obviously, Georgia's very prosperous. But a lot of that is because of the incentives that we have had that have helped grow businesses here, keep businesses here, and bring in new businesses. And so there were a number of bills dealing with the high-tech tax exemption and data centers and things of that nature that we wanted to see, a longer time period set on those sunsets. While they, did get extended, there were changes made to them also that changed the amount that a business would have to pay into those. And so some of those things were things that, we would have liked to have seen them go further.
And I know that probably the most popular that everyone knows, the film industry, right? So that's the one when, folks think of tax incentives and the fact that we've seen such tremendous growth in that film industry in Georgia, to the point where, gosh, a lot of times we're actually doing more by dollar than really anywhere else, including LA at some point. So I know that this is a huge deal. I mean, this is a big piece of why we give these exemptions. And of course, being here in North Fulton in a very high tech corridor, this is very important to our members as well. So that's
absolutely.
That's definitely one that I can think of. So you and I both serve on the Regional Business Coalition, and you have actually lobbied on behalf of that group for many years. Can you maybe talk and tell our listeners a little bit about RBC, Regional Business Coalition, and how all of the chambers work together in Metro Atlanta to really be a more cohesive voice of business?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great group. And as you said, it's made up of 16 of the Metro Atlanta area chambers of commerce. And so this organization is kind of an umbrella organization that all of those chambers can come together on, no matter if you're on, the north side of the metro area or the south side, wherever you may be in the metropolitan area, but you can come together under this organization and we can all advocate on things that we can all agree on, because it's things that are going to be good for the whole region. And as one thing's good for one area or one part of the region, we know it will be good for another. And so those areas that we focus on are transportation, water, air quality, and economic development. And so we use those as our guiding principles to help us pick and choose which matters to advocate on. But it's a great group that meets every other month throughout the year and focuses on those policy areas. And then during the legislative session, we help advocate on any legislation that comes up that may impact those areas.
And you're always an excellent resource for those 16 chambers as well. So we thank you for that. So let's talk about the Mental Health Parity Act. Tell me about it. I don't know enough about this particular bill.
Yeah. So this bill is definitely a bill that is going to have a lasting impact on Georgia. And it was really something that was very important to the Speaker of the House. And the Speaker doesn't engage typically on bills directly, but this is one that he did decide, to engage in. It became an issue that really was a bipartisan supported bill that moved through the process and was, just one of those that kind of worked out well. There was a commission that started 2 years ago to hear issues in the mental health area. And so some of that pertains to access and coverage and, how our small towns and big cities handle those populations, how our law enforcement handles those populations. And so a number of recommendations that came out of that Mental Health Commission were what compiled the Mental Health Parity Act. And so now, and especially I think in light of everything that's happened over the last 2 years, I think, mental health issues are, from what we're seeing and learning, on the rise and more prevalent. And so more communities are having to find ways to deal with them. And so this bill allows, your coverage with insurance to be as we currently, are treating not mental health issues, we're currently treating medical issues. Now we can treat mental health issues the same way. And so that creates that parity there. It also puts into place, ways in which law enforcement will handle people that come in, where people will be taken if they're picked up somewhere. They may not need to go to a jail and they may not need to go to an emergency room, but help them figure out where the right place is for them to go. And so it's a big step in moving in the right direction to help mental health patients throughout our state.
Well, and this has become, as you mentioned, with the last 2 years with COVID, such a much more focused on area, I guess is the right way to say it. It's always been an area, perhaps not brought to light in the way it is now. So, and I know law enforcement, what a difficult thing to deal with in light of everything else that's going on and that they're dealing with as first responders.
Yep.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about legislative session, a look back, the things that have come out that really are business associated, and then that will be changing the face of Georgia and certainly in Metro Atlanta where we are. So let's talk about primary elections, right? Let's look forward a little bit. Campaigns have started. I know April 4th, those incumbents were not able to fundraise until after that was session ended. So that obviously looks different as well. So this year's session is leading really directly into this, the 2022 primary election with all the state offices up for a vote on May 24th. And we encourage everyone to vote. I think it's very important that we all exercise our right to vote. We don't tell people which side to vote on because that's not, business takes all folks. But I'm curious what your predictions and insights are and how you think this election season will go. And you mentioned the district maps, right? The redistricting. Mm-hmm. So that's, as you mentioned, going to look a little different. So all things primary, Lauren, fill us in.
Well, yeah. So starting with the new maps, it is different for lawmakers who are incumbents because almost all of their districts did change. And so they do have a new constituency that they're probably out there meeting or, going door to door canvassing those neighborhoods. And so that's part of it. Also, and this has been a trend over the last couple of years because in Georgia, our state house and Senate members have to run for office every 2 years. But almost everybody has a primary challenger, and a lot of them have a general challenger. And one of the things that I thought was interesting from this year after the maps have been changed is that more of your, I would say, more contentious races or races that may be more up for grabs are going to be in the primaries rather than the generals because the maps were drawn as so to more so, somewhat be a Democratic district or a Republican district. Those fights won't so much be for the House and Senate seats in November, but for folks who are going to be challenged in May 24th, when the primary date is just 4 weeks from yesterday, actually. And so, a number of folks who do have primary challengers are certainly, worried about that because a lot of them are in new districts and they may not know who their opponents are. And as you said, the opponents can raise money during the legislative session, but incumbents are not allowed to. And so they kind of miss out on those 3 months of campaigning when typically you would want to be out and about and being seen in your district. So that's different. Also, as you mentioned, all statewides are up for re-election, and all of them are challenged to. A number of the statewide offices also have primaries, and so a number of them have like 9 candidates in it, or something, for example. And so, I think a lot of the decisions are going to be at this primary level, really doing your research on who some of these candidates are, and going to those folks' website and figuring out who you're going to vote for. And so, I know that there are 41 open seats. So regardless of who wins or loses, there's going to be a bunch of new people joining the legislature next year.
That's got to be a record. That's insane.
It is. It is a big record. We had a lot of folks retiring this year.
I saw that. Yes.
Yeah. And so there'll be lots of new faces and lots of new, ideas and people who are running for whatever reason, coming down and trying to make an impact. So there'll certainly be an eventful campaign season, from now through November because, as I said, you've got a lot of high profile candidates running in the primaries, as well as the general. And so I think it's hard to believe because so much money was poured into Georgia in the last election cycle, more than ever before. I think you're going to see that again. Even more money is going to be poured into Georgia. And so, just get ready to watch the ads and get a lot of mail pieces.
Buckle up. This is going to be an interesting ride over the next few months. This retirement thing really is real, the generational, lots of baby boomers who are retiring, but also because of what we've seen with COVID, I think a lot of people are just like, you know what, it's time. I'm going to go ahead and step down. And so I guess from a standpoint of the legislature is no different from any other business and what we're seeing right now out there.
Absolutely. I think a lot of the ones who are retiring have been down there for 20 plus years, and so I think, just after a while, you feel like maybe you've done what you needed or what you came to do, and you're ready to go home and relax a little, maybe.
I respect that. Yeah. I think that's awesome. But wow, 41 open seats. There's also, something to be said for institutional knowledge. So
absolutely.
It's going to be an interesting
to lose
time.
that.
Yes. And so I hesitate to even ask this, but the crystal ball, I'm sure is maybe not working as well right now, having just come out of everything. But along with new elected officials, we are probably looking towards many new pieces of legislation that'll be introduced. Are there any priorities that are already being discussed? I know when we talked about the Mental Health Parity Act, you referenced the fact, rightfully so, of the task force that looked into that for a good long time. Are there any of those that are showing right now as far as what we believe are going to be coming up next session?
Yeah, so a couple things, not specifically to what the legislation may look like, but there are certain topics that have bubbled up this past session, and that happens often, and it may not be ripe for passing a bill or changing the law on it because the legislature may feel they need to do more research and study of the issues. And so one of those that was a big one this year was electric vehicles and just everything related to electric vehicles, whether that be the manufacturing of electric vehicles with the Rivian announcement here in Georgia, the workforce training for people to work at the Rivian plant and others, trainers, workers who are trained to work on those cars that may go in for service, charging stations where they're at within our
huge,
state.
Right?
Yes. And so, there's a lot of look and consideration as to how many charging stations do we currently have in our state, where are they located. I know the federal DOT is asking states to submit plans to basically map out where they need charging stations. And so there'll be some grant money that Georgia will be going after for that use. And so electric vehicles, so there is going to be a House and Senate study committee on electric vehicles, and really all that entails. I know Ford's had a lot of recent announcements lately, and so there's just so much going on in that area. And so I think that there will be legislation to come over the next probably few years related to that. Also, another topic that was big this year, and it got a lot of attention and there's a House study committee on it, is on affordable housing. And so a lot of discussion as our metropolitan area does grow and, people are moving here. Where can they live and work and afford housing as the housing market, is really going well here, but obviously prices some families out of the marketplace of where they may work and not be able to live right there. And so there's a lot of discussion about that and how to solve those problems. And so I think you'll see there was legislation introduced this year that didn't pass, but there's definitely going to be a study committee. So I think you'll see more to come on that as well.
Yeah, those study committees are usually a very good precursor to what we can expect to see in the coming months. So I certainly appreciate that and the insight. And I neglected to say, I should have, when we were talking about retirement and generational changes, on the last day of session, if I'm not mistaken, it was lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, not just one, who honored Dean of the House, Columbus Representative Calvin Smyer.
Yes.
And I know he had been nominated by President Biden to serve as the U.S. ambassador to the Dominican Republic. What an incredible human being. Can you tell us a little bit about how his legacy is going to be honored?
Yes. So, Dean Calvin Smyer, as we call him, the Dean of the House, because he is the longest serving member in the House, is just leaving such a legacy behind. And he's one of those members that, when the Democrats were in control years ago, he was obviously very well thought of and in leadership roles within those times. And then also when the Republicans took over, I think he's just someone who has had so much respect and, someone with such institutional knowledge, as we were talking about before, that leaders of both parties have always looked to him for guidance and mentorship. And he's really led on so many tough issues. And one of the ones I can think of that you and I worked on with the Regional Business Coalition was the transportation funding and the way that we fund transportation now in the state. And so he was instrumental in helping that legislation get passed on House Bill 170, along with so many other things that, are pre me even, But, that was one of the ones that I got to know him through that process and really see the way that he was able to work with his party as well as with the Republicans and the Speaker of the House at that time to really, be a liaison for both sides and help see that legislation in particular get bipartisan support. So he's going to be greatly missed. I believe that they are going to hang a portrait of him in the Capitol to
wonderful.
honor him. Yes. And as you said, there was a big celebration in his honor at the College Football Hall of Fame, and great attendance from members of both parties and the House and the Senate. Like you said, not just the House, but the Senate also, really thinks a lot of Representative Smyrie. So he will be greatly missed. And, we hope that he'll come back and see us. And I'm sure that a lot of Georgians will probably now want to be traveling to the Dominican Republic and go pay him a visit as well.
That's phenomenal. I think that's a great testament to Georgia and the level of leadership that they've had as well. So always a great thing. All right. So let's talk about business members of the Chamber, my organization. You're a professional who likes to focus on politics and has since you were a little kid. So I figure you're a good expert to ask. How can our business members have their voices heard best at the Capitol? And I know that, we as the Chamber are the voice of business, and I think collectively we do a very good job of that. But what method should they use to be able to interact with House and Senate members when they have a significant issue that they want addressed?
Yeah. And, a lot of times people think this is a complicated answer. There's some special science to it, but really it boils down to relationships, and politics, and just like many, areas of business are all about those relationships, right? And so you want to do business with somebody you know and trust. And, we have great lawmakers at the state capitol who are so more than willing to hear from or talk to any constituent of theirs. But it's always surprising how few will reach out to them. There are certain ones that are going to always reach out, but a lot of people, feel like they shouldn't bother them, or maybe they don't have time, or, who knows what the reason is. But what I would say to encourage everybody is get to know your state representative, your state senator personally, because they are so close to the people. It's funny to me sometimes when people think, that their state representatives in DC. I'm like, no, they're actually downtown in Atlanta and you can go visit them, and you can get their cell phone and you can call them. And so I think the biggest way to build that relationship is to get to know them when you don't have an issue that you're asking for help on, and, build that relationship over time. So then when there is something that you want to engage on or let them know how you feel on, you can pick up the phone and call them or text them, and they're going to respond back to you because they know who you are. And, there's that level of trust and understanding there.
That makes absolute sense. It's like any relationship. So, and in my experience working with our legislative delegation, that certainly is the case. They do want to hear from their folks and understand better. It's hard to be an expert in every single area. And so hearing from people who are experts in those areas are incredibly important. So I agree. I think that's wise counsel, Lauren. Thank you. Well, let's wrap up the show, and let's, Lauren, if you can tell our listeners how they can find you. What's the best way if they want to reach out to you or to Fralick Bozeman?
Great. Well, we have a new website, so you can go to www.fralick, that's Fralick, Bozeman, BOZEMAN.com, or you can email me at lauren@fralickbozeman.com. Or you can call me at 404-520-2254. And we're on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter as well. So look us up on there.
You are a brave woman giving out your cell phone number. Let me tell you, I appreciate very much you taking the time to be with us today. I've always appreciated and enjoyed working with you. Certainly still enjoy working with you with the Regional Business Coalition, and look forward to many bright years of working with you with Fralick Bozeman as well. Lauren, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Kali.
I want to thank my guest, Lauren Fralick, for joining me today, and also thank our listeners for joining us on the GNFCC 400 Insider presented by the Greater North Fulton Chamber. To listen to this show again or to hear any of our previous episodes, visit GNFCC400insider.com or any of your favorite podcast platforms. To find out more about our government affairs initiatives and to learn more about the Greater North Fulton Chamber events and programs, you can always visit GNFCC.com. Until next time, I'm Kali Boatright, and this has been the GNFCC 400 Insider on Business RadioX.